means, and I will then open the floor to kick off discussion. Who would like to ask the first question? Why does everyone go so silent? Go again. Volunteer there.
Has, and if so how, has research changed the way that you the diet and what you eat and how you source it?
You're looking at a boy who struggles with his diet. You know, I've got the genetic potential to become a very big boy, basically. I don't know, it's no problem. I'm not. You know, so my relationship with food has a tension within it, and so there's a whole series of different things that are going on at the same time. I would like to eat healthily, so there's a whole thing about healthy eating and those sorts of things. In terms of where I source my food from, I am a terrible hypocrite, but I recognise my hypocrisy. I grow food in my garden. I try to buy some local food in terms of meat and stuff from farmers, family that I know. I shop a lot in Waitrose. My life is very complicated and very intense, and my dream would be to be able to go off-grid and grow all my own food and live in splendid isolation. You know, that would just be the great, and there are other, I hate Facebook, I hate Twitter, I hate all those things that, you know, well, Rebecca would really like me to do. So there is an aspiration and there is the reality of living the life that I sort of do live. One of the problems that I have with a lot of local food supply is that it's, you know, despite what you might think about university lecturers, the circumstances I'm in, it's expensive. And that is a major consideration. I prefer to buy less and eat better. But the day-to-day tensions of the world in which I live in mean that I can't potentially do what I want to do. I'm honest with myself. I don't feel guilty. I just feel that that's the way in which I live, and I recognise that hypocrisy. I could have told you a whole pack of lies. I didn't want to because that's a nice young lady. And you know, it's a problem though for us in that ease of supply of local food, it doesn't exist. It's a complicated supply chain. It tends to gravitate towards speciality niche market foodie type products rather than being able to say, oh, I know where I can go and get my vegetables. You know, I could have a box scheme. I could do that, but it's something that I haven't done. When I was younger, we used to do a lot more local supply. And I'm not sure, we used to buy a lot from farm shops and things like that. I'm not sure why. I think it's because of the frenetic pace of life. So I acknowledge my guilt and I apologise. But I haven't really got anything to apologise for, it's just what I do. What I would like to see is food supply chains which meant that local farmers could produce products which could end up in mainstream food supply chains in Bournemouth and Dorchester and places like that. Yes?
Do they not do that already in France? And I may have made this up, but I had this idea that in France, in some markets, supermarkets and larger stores, they give over a certain percentage of their floor space to local producers.
There is an element of that. Within France, there's, you know, France is a glorious place that I like to visit. But there is a tension within French society. We were having a conversation yesterday about living in Paris and seeing the growth of McDonald's, KFC, and all that sort of stuff. At one stage, the boulangerie, you know, it would never die. Well, it's virtually dead, you know, because the different supermarkets can produce the baguettes, and the French have gone over to doing that. So there is a tension. There is an image of supply chains within France which are very strongly locally connected. However, there is also a movement And even if you set off a certain amount of space for local produce, as I said, an average British supermarket, 24 to 48,000 different lines in an average supermarket. It's one of the problems with the local supply is it's just so expensive to do, it's so difficult. If I'm working in a supermarket, I can go on board the computer, I can order the whole thing. In fact, a lot of it will be done automatically through the EPOS, electronic point of sale system. If I want to secure local supply, I've got to ring people up. I've got to arrange for delivery. I've got to do all these, and that's one of the things that kills. You know, in Dorset, we had a dream about 20 years ago of setting up local food hubs. One in West Dorset, one in North Dorset, one in the Bournemouth area, where local suppliers could bring their stuff in, add value to it, and those could also be used as distribution centres. You know, I suppose if we had £6 million, we could set up those sorts of facilities in a substantial way. Running them though, one of the problems with a lot of local food schemes is that they have been funded through grant aid, and what you have to have is a sustainable economic model, full stop. Okay, you might use the money to start the business, but it has to work off its own back and be sustainable. There's a problem with that because the systems that we have in place do not recognise some of the costs which society is taking on board in terms of environmental destruction to our own personal health. That is an overdraft taken out with the environment, society and individuals, which doesn't appear in the spreadsheets. But that's not an excuse. We have to be able to develop systems which are sustainable. And there are cost disadvantages for the consumer in consuming local compared to these other systems. And when you have a recession such as we've been through, one of the early victims are more expensive food. So you've had the growth of Aldi and Lidl because of the value that they produce, and you've had a certain loyalty to people like Waitrose, possibly because of the demographic of people who are there. But you've seen slippage, and you've also seen slippage in the purchasing of organic food and other things, because it's the way people prioritise and the way society looks at food. Still, food is cheap. My parents spent 20% of their income on feeding us as a family. We spend 10% of our income on feeding our family. But we've developed a taste for other things. So, yes, there is a certain policy in France, and I can't remember the numbers. There is still, it's moving in that direction, you know, away from local supply, away. And some of the leading supermarkets in the world are French. Carrefour, you know, international operations. So it's about thinking whether the boat has in fact sailed. I really hope it hasn't, but there is such a job of work to do anything more than is either tokenism, lighting the candle to curse the darkness, or middle-class foodism. And I'm not sure how to do that without a lot of money.
Sure. I think it hasn't sailed. Because I think that there is another way. There's a thing called Incredible Edible, which started in what was my hometown, Tonbridge, in West Yorkshire. And so this lady called Pamela Walhurst, who basically had enough of this situation that you're describing. And she sat down with some of her friends and in a kitchen basically realised that a lot of the answers to the problems of local food were around them. And they just hadn't seen them because all they needed to do was to act rather than getting all het up about how much space there was and how much it cost. So what they did is they started looking around for spare bits of land just on the corners of streets and in front of the police station, college and everywhere else, including hospitals, obviously further afield, things like that. And they just said, you know, maybe if we ask nicely, people will let us just start growing vegetables there. And so they asked the council council insisted on them signing forms of tribute and some people things for recycling as well, so they did. And then, you know, they got the actual permission to just grow vegetable gardens right in the middle of the town, where everyone could get them. And so they did. And then people started to come down, and the vegetables were available for free for anybody to take, as long as, ideally, those who take them, you know, think to put something back, and most of them do. And so it's become a self-sustaining and self-snowballing system where more and more of the town is taking part. More and more places have given permission for vegetables to grow around the high school we're talking about this. Running half of its kitchen of this locally grown food. They've got greenhouses in their school grounds where it used to just be a money field that was full. They've got so many new ideas kicking around. And we've had visitors from Japan recently coming over to have a look at all the fusses about. The idea is spread not just throughout the UK but around the world. And there's towns in America, France, Eastern, and everywhere else, who have taken the idea on board. And I think it would be brilliant to see something like that in Bournemouth and other places around here.
I think it would. I think those things are great. I think the amount of food that Bournemouth consumes in a day
that would take more.
It's just phenomenal, and that's what I mean about a maybe the boat has gone.
Yeah, that's going to happen no matter how much food you try to grow. That's a given, I think. You might as well contribute as much as you can from the local soil rather than just growing thorny bushes.
Yeah, no,
London came up with that thing not so long ago where they said if there's any disused spaces of land, the community is actually encouraged to get together, write to I don't know who you write to the council, but it's a government-wide policy now, and you suggest using it for a particular purpose. And that would mean, I was just thinking before Dan mentioned that you've got a situation like in Boston, you've got people living in flats that have no garden. I used to have no garden myself in Wareham and not Boston. I moved here and I've got, I did until I just recently got divorced, but a house that did have a shared garden, but we wouldn't really be able to grow any veg because it wasn't really, and then you start to think, as Danny mentioned, you want the whole Bournemouth kind of getting locally grown stuff that can join the box scheme, or they could get onto that government thing and sort of send off things and say, like at the back of the Winter Gardens car park, and they're just this great big bit of pointless land, it seems to me. I mean, it's attractive because it's got trees in it, but it's not part of any footpath, so it'll fit right with us. Yeah,
and those sort of things, that they build social cohesion,
Yeah.
which is about the political, you know, what I consider political benefits of local food. And I think that it is fantastic. I see so many gardens as well, particularly sometimes of older people or younger people, where the land is is grass or is the dreaded decking and you know, they don't, and there is potential there. I've got a very small garden, and we've got 4 raised beds, and we grow things there. And I remember how my grandfather used to garden. I've seen aerial photographs of my house, or if not the house that was there before, sort of 80 years, and you can see the land where the guy who used to live in our house fed his family from that land. It is great and it is fantastic to really get in and solve and really get those farmers in the vicinity who have hundreds of acres getting their crops into our schools and hospitals. That's one of my dreams, and the infrastructure necessary to do that is expensive, and that's where the sort of boat that I think may have sailed.
I can't remember, did Jamie Oliver mention that we did the schools?
Yeah, I've got some quite strong feelings about Jamie Oliver. And you know, it's if you go to West Dorset and you go and look what they've done in local schools, and look at the orchard project, you know, the fact that in West Dorset schools used to get their fruit down from wholesalers from London for the bitter day, whatever it is that schools do, and they linked up to orchards, and then how they took over supplying that midday meal using local produce. And I think that's a fantastic example. It's the scale, the economies of scale, because these international supply chains, these supermarkets, these caterers, it's an enormous, enormous juggernaut, and people make so much money out of it. The vested interests, the politics, the power are against the individual, whether it's the small farmer or the consumer.
That's it, they're not insurmountable.
It's, I think that what, did you say it's not insurmountable?
Yeah.
I think it's not insurmountable through the process of bloody revolution. But I look at it, and having travelled round and seen the power, I've followed red meat all around the world, abattoirs in New Zealand, Australia, South America, Ireland, and you look at the nature of this beast. And in a country like France, where when the first McDonald's came in, they set fire to them and things like that, and you used to have that big Gallic chap, Obelix, that used to do all the protesting and all that. And so, no, we will never have, and now you go and they're there. Because it's like water. You know, it just sort of moves. You can't, it's insidious in the way it works.
The thing is, people want it, don't they? That's the thing.
There is a demand which it fills. And, you know, it's, yeah,
So that was what the demand was when supermarkets were coming in. People wanted, easy food that was quick and easy to get from the supermarket. I think now there's quite a demand for local things, and for people to be able to get hold of those easily. Thanks to the internet, it's becoming a lot more possible to organise people in their local town to get these sorts of things together.
I think there's a good point there. There is an interest. I don't know how big that interest actually is. I mean, it's
I'm
like
trying to look into it as soon as you get home or whatever.
Yes.
It's bigger than you think.
it may well be, but the thing is, it's a bit like when we do research work and you go up and you speak to somebody on the high street and you say, do you love the environment? What do you think about this? And they say, oh yes, I love Bunnings and all this. It goes through and that, and we come back as a type of person. But when you look at their shopping patterns and the products they buy in store, that's what potentially saddens me in a way. And also the level of ignorance, those comments by people who obviously had a certain amount of education in terms of food. The average person, no, I shouldn't use that expression because that's wrong. There is no such thing as an average person.
Many people comment on the website.
Sorry?
There's no such thing as an average person leaving comments.
There is not, no. There certainly is not, no, because everyone is a glorious individual. However, there is a certain, how can I put this, it'll come out wrong, whichever way I put it. In a country where The Sun is one of the most successful newspapers, I have a view about the way in which society works. It's not judgmental, I hope, although it's coming across as terribly judgmental. It's simply about the reality of life. People want to eat certain things, and they want that ease. They want not to think.
It's all about how you present it.
Potentially, yes.
That's the point I wanted to make. Exactly that. It's about demand and choice and all those things. And I wonder how there might be plenty out there, but how resilient and serious it is. Because, example, I like bananas. I just went over the road and bought some bananas from Sainsbury's. 5 for £1. They were organic and they were fair trade. And I wonder how much of that pound is fair and found its way back to the people who
Well, you
picked
don't want to get me
bananas.
on that.
Well, I was, do you know what I mean? Because I might be feeling less guilty because they're organic and
Yeah, no, I
fair trade,
I do
and they're
that.
at pounds, so I'm
Yeah.
a winner.
Yeah, we all win, don't we? I was asked to join a certain committee on a certain organisation, and I wasn't prepared to join the committee because I'm cynical, not about the idea of fair trade, which I think is very right and just. I'm just thinking about how much that bar of chocolate costs me, and how much I want to go back to the individual. How much is a price premium which is being creamed off. There's a really good potential study just looking at that. I have seen representatives of fair trade who have come to the university and spoken, and it has transformed their lives being involved in that. But then I've spoken to other people who are who see how fair trade has grown as an organisation, and they're looking for different schemes to sort of have some additional power to work to create a tension with fair trade, to try and get fair trade to be fairer. You know, what's and the other problem that I have, with all due respect, is so I go and I have fair trade coffee, and the coffee is fair trade, and the milk, the price the British farmer gets for milk is less than the price of bottled water. So what's fair about that?
I just, before I came in, because I mentioned coffee, I like the books that I've got here, but you don't always get it in coffee shops. I was reading the one at the end, History of Coffee. It said, for every coffee farmer who spends a day farming, who's only getting $3 at the end of it, I mean, that's just going to be just under one cappuccino in the States. And it's the supply chain breaking off that. There's such a long supply chain, 17 steps in coffee. They're breaking off all that extra value out of the coffee bean that's been, it's not going to be there if it wasn't for the farmer. But there's a new thing coming along that I'm quite excited about. It's going to be a home roast machine that you set your green beans at the top, roast them in a mini chamber and passes it down. It's called Verdi something, but it was on a startup site, Kickstarter. Yeah, fair trade is obviously a continuum, isn't it? You have a fair trade and you can make it more and more fair. And they're trying to get rid of the sort of 17-stage journey that the bean has in the supply chain. They get green farmers selling direct to consumers who just took it into their home machine. I don't know what it would cost, because it's only just been launched. Kickstarter and finished their fund period. Just roasts to the top and then passes down and gets grind underneath. So that's going to be, there is ways of getting what we think of as the maximum amount of fair trade to be suddenly far more fair trade. Hopefully people can come up with new things like that all the time.
So what about organic? Any thoughts? A few words?
No, I'm going to. I know it's off a bishop.
You gave us food so that we wouldn't ask difficult questions.
I don't consider them to be difficult. I just think the answer is difficult, not the question. It's as part and parcel of a whole package of things. I think that it is very worthy. You can industrialise organic production. You know, what do we mean by organic? People think that organic means without the use of fertilisers and chemicals, and that's not true. You know, you can use them, but they're used in a different way, and there are different withholding periods. And as a philosophy, I think it's great. I think that many people have industrialised it. You've got to be able to. We're very lucky in this. We're very lucky in this country. You know. There are many people who starve. How can we feed them? How can we change the way in which we look at social justice throughout the world to really make a real step change? Will that ever happen? And you live in hope, and you see some examples, and organic as part of a certain systems of food supply, I think, is fantastic. Organic can be twisted, though, I think, in other ways. And also, it's like that fair trade coffee bean. By the time it gets to where you are, there are lots of people who've taken a big chunk out of that. So it's not the panacea, it's not the answer. It has to be part of something else, something bigger, something more joined up. And in part, it's also to do with the. This is going to sound very. This is going to sound slightly Marxist, and good job too. The freedom of the means of production. You know, agricultural land is now £10,000, between £7,000 and £10,000 an acre for average sort of land. That's a lot of money. I certainly can't afford to buy a farm. That means that the means of production is being vested in the hands of fewer and fewer people. You know, it means that control, even small farms, control substantial capital assets. What is happening? This is crazy. It's crazy economics. Why is that happening? Because people are looking for sure ways of holding on to their money, and also they will be looking at in the future sure ways of feeding their nation and supplying their nations with energy, which is why some countries are buying up areas of South America and Africa, so that they can ensure that their country is able to benefit from the food in the future, and also the energy. One thing, even if you don't believe that global warming is caused by carbon dioxide and the burning of fossil fuels, carbon economy, making the best use of our carbon, is a good idea, full stop, because it's a limited resource. And so sustainable, renewable forms of energy that are really renewable and not just done as a tax break for people, there is extreme value in that. But then you're in a situation where you've got a growing population, or a population where many people would like to eat some of the diet that we eat, like meat and things like that. That involves more resources, and so there's a competition in terms of producing food and producing power in the future, and using crops to produce plastics, which we all use. Very few in this Western society. There are lots of tensions there, but when the fundamental problem, I believe, is that the means of production are held by very few people, and the wealth within society is held by fewer and fewer people. And within the world, the Western world holds a disproportionate amount of wealth and control over the means of production, even in other countries. So that lack of equity and democracy creates a tension worldwide, and I don't know how to relieve that tension without bloody revolution. That's it's a bit deep for Tuesday, isn't it?
I think that might, I'm afraid, sadly, has anyone got a couple of really, really quick questions, and then we'll have to wrap up, I'm afraid, into that stormy night. Thank God, he's doing an amazing job keeping us secure as the wind blows in. No, definitely allowed.
Do you think it's possible for everybody to have access to local food, or for everybody to sustain life on local food?
Yes, I do. However, we would have to look at a wholesale change to the type of life that we lead, and I don't think that society, as an academic, that's a dangerous thing to use that word, because I get told off for using the word society, not because people don't think you have to define what you mean by it, but people won't step back. They have a standard of living which they've got to, an ease of doing things which they've got to, and in order to do that, we would have to change the dynamics of the world in which we live. And I don't think people are prepared to do that for whatever reason. And we can look at a very simple example. If global warming is to do with CO2 production, then why doesn't the UK take that on board and unilaterally slash back our production of CO2? And it's politically unacceptable. That's, and a lot of these things, because of the way in which masses of people operate for whatever reason, and shop in Waitrose rather than going to local farmers market, I cannot see that happening without bloody revolution, or something coming along which fundamentally changes the nature of society. I think in Star Trek it was the provision of unlimited free energy, that did the sort of nuclear fusion reactors. What might that do if we removed energy from the whole equation of everything, because we could get it for free, which is what they thought we would get with nuclear power, but we didn't. We got other stuff, but now Lovelock, etc., are thinking it's a better option than we might have thought in the first place. It's like flares. They went out of fashion.
Okay, so we have walked out to start the revolution in flares. Can we just say an enormous thank you to Sean for a fantastic discussion.